for you.
You don't have to speak into the microphone anymore.
I tell you, Detroit Mercy decided to cancel.
Did they do that?
Cancel the rest of the season.
You were talking about it.
But it's still a fight.
The Noblesville City Council meeting to order for April 13th. Mr. Schwartz, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Sure.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so seating is limited tonight. I'll give you the public call-in number, 149-998-6201. When you're prompted, enter the conference ID 342-631-867 hashtag. You can also watch this on Hamilton County TV. And if this is a long agenda tonight, so feel free to get up and come and go when your item's available to help limit the crowds. We would appreciate that. We will not be offended if you leave after your item or come in early, but and you're free to stay for the whole thing. Ms. Lees, could you call the roll?
Mr. Ayers?
Present.
Mr. Boyce?
Present.
Mr. Davis?
Present.
Mr. Hampton?
Here.
Mr. O'Connor?
Present.
Mr. Schwartz? Mr. Smith?
Present.
Ms. Wiles?
Present.
Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Mr. President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Can I have approval of the minutes from the March 23rd meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second to approve the minutes from the March 23rd meeting. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 9-0. We have approval for the agenda.
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles,
I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
please, I'm sorry. We need to make an amendment.
Oh,
I was coaching there. I was coaching you there.
we do.
You
Yeah.
forgot to coach that.
Would you like to make a motion to amend the
Sure,
agenda?
I would be
Thank
happy
you.
to make a motion to amend the
Amend the
agenda,
agenda.
easy for me to say, to change ordinance number 19-04-21 and -20-04-21 to read as R3 single family instead of R4 two family, and R3 instead of R4. That's my motion.
There's a motion to amend the agenda. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of amending the agenda, please raise your right hand. Now,
Now I would make a motion that we approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
motion to approve the agenda as amended and a second. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. 9-0. 9-0, did Mark vote? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, petitions by citizens who are present. We have several here. I assume they're all for an agenda item, and I assume they're all for the same agenda item. And that is number 180421. You are welcome to speak now or wait till we get to the item. I would assume everyone wants to wait till we get to the item. Just a quick reminder, you have, everyone has the petitioner, after the petitioner presents, citizens will be allowed to have 3 minutes to speak. Let's move on to council committee reports. EDCC.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Economic Development Committee met on the 31st of March. Just highlights from that meeting. We discussed the 2020 highlights and then first quarter 21 economic development activity. Needless to say, there's quite a bit happening. I won't go into all of those, but as we've seen on our agendas, things are moving forward, so we'll see more opportunities here in the not too distant future. ED has put together a draft of their 2025 strategic action plan, which will be forthcoming for review, I think, at our retreat on Saturday. There may be some discussion of that, so look forward to hearing about that. But there's a number of different targeted industries that are part of that, so I think you'll find that interesting. Probably the most important part of that meeting were the TIF pro formas that we discussed, which we've worked on for a couple of years now, and we've now finally gotten a draft that I think will become more specific to what we've been after, which at the end of the day, it's going to break down all of the TIF districts, all the cash, everything associated with those TIFs, including debt levies or debt related to the TIFs. And we will see the final product of that in the not-too-distant future as well. But suffice to say that it's been kind of a long time coming, but we've finally gotten there, and I think that will give us more definitive information for decision-making when we get into financing, particularly in and around the TIF areas. So that was a welcome discussion. And then we talked about a public art ordinance, which there was some commentary on. I think it's generally a good idea, but we've got some different tweaks and things to make to that before it comes forward. So, Mr. President, those were the highlights of the meeting.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. O'Connor and the EDCC? Having none, a roads committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Roads met on April 2nd. Council members Smith and O'Connor and myself were there. As you might expect, it was a very long, busy meeting. If you've driven around Noblesville lately, the roads are a lot of work being done, indeed. But some of the highlights, lighting at Little Chicago and State Road 38. NDOT concurs that lighting is needed at that intersection. They're trying to identify funding for the project, and it may still be a few years before that's available and finished. Street rehab, funds available to complete Pebblebrook. 2021 projects, the Community Crossing Grant, $181,000 was awarded to resurface the Kingsley subdivision. Other road construction projects include Oleo Road, which remains closed between 141st and 146th Street, will reopen July 1st. The Greenfield Avenue Culvert over Lear Ditch is reopened. 146th Street at State Road 37 is closed, has been, I think, one day now, and it's a 7-day project. Other NDOT projects include the roundabouts that are kind of sprinkled all around the area. They continue on progress, planning on schedule. Signals will be replaced on 32, on State Road 32 at State Road 19, 8th Street, 9th, and 10th Streets. NDOT is agreeable to the black decorative poles.
Working that into
Thank you.
tonight's meeting. Thank you.
Pleasant Street, Phase 1, 10th to River Road is on schedule. A second interested parties meeting will be held this month. Mr. Mayor, do you know if there's a date yet on that actual? Is it next week? Okay. We did not have the date actually at the meeting, but it's coming up this month. I'm sorry, I put you on the spot.
Okay, you have it on
16th?
there. The 26th.
26th, okay.
26th at 1 o'clock.
Thank you, Mayor. And downtown district, the streetscape design is ongoing. And that's a little bit of what happened at the Roads Committee.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Hampton?
Mr. President, just a comment. You may have noticed 146th Street is closed. Traffic through Wellington Northeast was quite heavy, but that should open back up in a few days. So bear with us, have some patience. It's a challenge, but they had to move the lanes on 146th Street to, for the future activities at the interchange. So hopefully, I think in 5 days it should reopen, but bear with us. They'll get it back open.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Finance Committee, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. We met last Thursday. Will Hampton, Greg O'Connor, Megan Wiles, and myself were in attendance. Andrew and Mary discussed bond authorizations for both Washington Business Park and East Bank Development Project. And we also discussed another bond authorization for the Nickel Plate Heritage Railroad Assistance. Jeff Spalding discussed a new fund, the American Rescue Plan, Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, and Civil City Summary of Funds. And Sam Barris discussed our 2022 budget development timeline. That was about it, and the claims do come to the council with a favorable recommendation.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Davis, Finance Committee? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve the claims?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion to approve the claims in a second. There's a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you. New ordinances for discussion. Mr. Yost, do you know if we have anybody on the phone who would like to speak? One person, do you know which item they would like to speak on? Fairly comfortable, I know which one it is, but do you want to tap them in and see which one they want to speak on? Technology is beyond my... Mr. Mayor, would you like to speak? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. I'll be brief while Mr. Yost figures that answer out for you. I have just a few items I'd like to just quickly address with the council, and Mr. Davis addressed it earlier, but with the ARPA, which is the American Rescue Plan, with another word that starts with A, ACT after it, thank you. There's so many acronyms going around now. This is the first COVID relief bill that has passed Congress that has direct payments to cities and counties all across the country, which can be viewed as great news. And the city of Noblesville is set to receive approximately $13.5 million, which will be welcome relief. We're still waiting. I wanted to let you know that we are still waiting on guidance from Treasury. Oftentimes, our great friends at the federal government are generous with the dollar, but are often very particular with their dollars as well. And so we look forward to them guiding us on how we should spend that on the local level to best move our city forward. So we just want to let you know that we'll be meeting with you, I think, individually over the next several days to talk about the different buckets of funds. I know we plan to address it this weekend as well at our council retreat, but wanted to let you know that we are on top of it. We know that these dollars are coming. You've obviously taken council fiscal action to establish the fund in which to receive the dollars, which is great news. And again, we are waiting further guidance from Treasury in order to spend those dollars going forward. So the second item I'd like to point out, obviously some of our COVID restrictions have changed over time on the statewide level with guidance from the state, the governor's office as well. As you know, Hamilton County was moved back up to a yellow status last week. We'll look forward, tomorrow on Wednesdays is where they adjust those numbers. But with that being said, our plan is to kind of maintain the status quo within the city of Noblesville in terms of city buildings. So we will continue moving that forward, and we'll adjust it at a time that the county does move back to a blue status. We will come back to you with kind of a new recommendations as to where we go from here. But as of now, with the county still in a yellow status, we will maintain as we have been to date. So thank you for your time. I know you have a long meeting tonight, but appreciate the opportunity to say a few words.
Any questions for the mayor? Mr. Yost? Any luck? The person who's on the line who would like to speak at tonight's meeting, when prompted, what did you just tell me?
Star six.
You have to see star 69.
Star six.
Star 6
Unmute.
to unmute. And then we'll know which item you'd like to speak on. Or you can speak right now. Okay. We'll move on, and if they jump in the middle of this presentation, we'll know what to do. Council to consider ordinance 160421, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of the City of Noblesville, Indiana taxable economic development revenue bonds, Series 2021 Washington Business Park Project, and the lending of the proceeds thereof to Patch Development LLC, and authorizing and approving other actions in respect thereto. Andrew
Motion
Murray.
introduced.
Second.
Thank you, President Peterson, members of council. Andrew Murray, Economic Development Director, for the record. This ordinance before you this evening, this is necessary in order to move forward with bond financing. This would result in proceeds being made available to our partner in Patch Development, specifically for the Washington Business Park partnership and project. As you'll recall, this financing, this is consistent with the Economic Development Agreement that this council approved back at your January 26th meeting. As a quick refresher, this investment would go towards needed infrastructure to 75 acres out along the State Road 37 corridor just north of 146th Street. Some of the key terms with this financing before you include, number one, this will be purchased by the developer, so we all know the risk behind that is minimal to zero to the taxpayer and tax rate. The aggregate principal amount would not exceed $6.8 million. The debt would mature on a date not later than 25 years, and then it would bear interest not to exceed 6%. The repayment source on this debt would be 65% pledge of tax increment that is generated from the park. And then lastly, as part of this approval and authorization to issue bonds, this also approves certain financing agreements to finalize this transaction, that being a trust and indenture loan agreement. So those are all forms that are located in the clerk's office. Procedurally speaking, we did vet this with Chairman Davis in the Council Finance Committee, as mentioned earlier. This does come to you with a favorable recommendation, and this is just first reading tonight, so we are not requesting action, but we'll be back before you at your next meeting requesting approval. From a timing perspective, we are planning to close on this financing by the end of the month, with plans to start turning dirt in Washington Business Park May 1st. With that, I'll stop there. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Murray? Seeing none. Move on to see you in 2 weeks, or right now. Council to consider ordinance 170421, an ordinance of the Noblesville Common Council authorizing the city of Noblesville, Indiana to issue its taxable economic development revenue bonds, Series 2021A East Bank Project, and taxable junior economic development revenue bonds, Series 2021B East Bank Project, and approving and authorizing other actions in respect thereto.
Motion to introduce.
Second.
Thank you, President Peterson. Members of council, again, Andrew Murray, Economic Development Director for the record. Similar to your last item, this is another exciting economic development project, which we are moving forward with bond financing. This is with our development partner in J.C. Hart Republic Development to construct the East Bank project. The East Bank project, as you'll recall, is at the southwest corner of 6th Street and Connor Street. And that project includes 219 high-end rental apartment units, 5,000 square feet of commercial retail space, and then a privately owned, operating, constructed parking structure. All of this, again, is adding to our downtown energy and density, which would ultimately aid in attracting new investment, quality business, and quality talent to Noblesville. Some of the key terms I want to highlight for this council. We're going to issue 2 bonds as part of this partnership. Number one, the first bond, Series A, would be in the aggregate amount of $9.9 million. This is the incentive we agreed pursuant to the agreement to provide to the project. And then the second would be, Series B would be in an aggregate principal amount of $1,020,000. Again, similar to your last item, this is a developer purchase bond. It will mature, both bonds will mature not later than 25 years. From an interest standpoint, Series A, this will bear interest not to exceed 6%. It's more likely looking at 4.5%, given current cash flows. And then the second series, Series B bonds, would bear 0% interest. Repayment source, again, this would be both from tax increment generated from the project. Series A would be a pledge from the project TIF, of course, following the first carve-out that we negotiated of $55,000 as part of that repayment pledge. And then the second series would be strictly a pledge from the developer's 30% share of the excess TIF generated, if any, from the project. Procedurally speaking, again, vetted this with the council committee, comes to this council with a favorable recommendation. If all goes to plan, we'll be back before you at your next meeting requesting approval, and we are tracking to close on this financing August 1st. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions for Mr. Murray?
Mr. President, I would just say that Mr. Murray has ate, slept, and breathed these documents for a while, so I appreciate all your efforts to bring this to fruition, and I will continue to read those as they come across my desk.
Thank you. Any other questions? We will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you. Council will consider an ordinance 180421, an amendment to a government use overlay to permit a telecommunications service facility on property at 18111 Cumberland Road.
Motion to introduce?
Second, we have Denise Ashelman, but does Ms.
Yes,
Bennett want to speak?
Council, I wanted to touch on a couple of procedural matters before this item is heard. We've got a number of government use overlays and plan development use overlays. And as you know, council's role in those is to adopt, reject, or modify the Plan Commission's recommendation on those items. The Unified Development Ordinance, or the UDO, governs these overlays and states that council's review is restricted to the Plan Commission record. This is not a statutory procedure, but rather a limitation imposed by the city's UDO and is particular just to zoning overlays. In addition to the Plan Commission record, though, council can consider a number of other considerations that do not conflict with other laws. With regard to this particular item, as Ms. Ashwin may note, and as noted in her staff report, wireless telecommunications service facilities such as this are regulated by the FCC or the Federal Communications Commission, and they follow the Federal Communications Act. The act prevents a local decision premised directly or indirectly on the environmental effects of radio frequency emissions, assuming that the provider is in compliance with FCC radio frequency rules. This simply means that you cannot take into consideration any comments here or at Plan Commission of environmental or health effects of radio frequency emissions. You can, however, take into account considerations such as whether or not the use is substantially consistent with the orderly development of contiguous land, reasonableness of the proposed land use, the kind or function of the land use involved, the availability of alternative locations, any attempts to minimize the detriments to the adjacent landowners, the scope of use, the use of the community, the need for the specific site, existing or immediate past use, or any other consideration in the UDO that do not relate to environmental or health impacts. With regard to procedure, though, council can properly allow no comment at this meeting and vote based on the Plan Commission's record. If council wants to allow comment, council may allow the petitioner to present their evidence that was presented at Plan Commission, but no additional evidence should be presented to council for consideration. Now, it's hard to police what Plan Commission's record was to the letter, but at the very least, the petitioner should stay on the topics that were discussed at Plan Commission and not present additional evidence that would have impacted the Plan Commission one way or another. That being said, in order to increase efficiency of this process, if you are the petitioner, it would be helpful if there was an objection raised at Plan Commission that has since been worked through, if you would state what that objection was and then also what that resolution was. Council can also allow residents or other parties besides the petitioner to comment, but their comments should stay within the scope of the Plan Commission's considerations. Likewise, if a resident or other party spoke at Plan Commission and raised an objection and no longer has that objection, please state that as well. If the petitioner wishes to introduce new evidence for consideration, it would be appropriate to send this item back to Plan Commission for a new public hearing. Thank you.
So after the presentation, if we feel this is substantially different, we can send this back to Plan Commission. That is an option. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good
Ms. Ashelman.
evening. How is everyone today? The proposed site is located on the south side of the Noblesville High School site near Monument Street. So you can see it's this red block here. And just to get a little bit more zoomed in look, more zoomed in than I wanted, this would be the back of the softball field, and this would be right at the corner. So the property is currently zoned R1 GUO, and the petitioner is proposing to install a wireless telecommunications service facility. The proposed cell tower and compound will be located just to the north of the batting cages, next to the softball field. Article 9 of the Unified Development Ordinance states that wireless telecommunications service facilities located on the property of units of government is a conditional use which necessitates a hearing. Because they have an existing GUO on this property, that hearing comes to this group. The lease area is 50 feet by 50 feet. It includes a number of equipment cabinets, generators, and the associated equipment for that cell tower. The proposed tower will be a 195-foot monopole. Sorry, didn't pull enough sheets of paper off. That looks generally like this. So the compound area at the bottom is fenced, and they have an agreement with the schools to use, most of us know it as windscreen, but we've used it in commercial applications. You can make it as opaque or see-through as you would like. The tower is set back 47.5 feet from their western property line, 660 feet from the south, and 840 feet from the east. The petitioner is not asking for any waivers from the standards for wireless telecommunications service facilities. These service facilities are regulated by multiple layers of government, and the ultimate authority, as Mrs. Bennett said, is the FCC. I'm going to skip that part because she stole that out of my staff report. The petitioner has provided a letter from the AT&T Engineering Group that certifies that they are in compliance with the FCC rules for radio frequency. That was provided right before the Plan Commission meeting to us. In Exhibit 6 from the Plan Commission staff report, you can find a letter from the Crownland Cemetery Board. The 4 softball fields to the east are actually owned by the cemetery. I'm sorry, to the west. My directions are off today. So these are actually on cemetery property. They're currently leased to the schools from the cemetery board. But they do have plans for expansion of the cemetery to house their military veterans. This is the military veterans section of the cemetery, and they do need additional space. The majority of the concerns raised at Plan Commission related to its proximity to the military veterans section of the cemetery. The staff did provide a recommendation to approve. The Plan Commission at their meeting voted to send it to you with an unfavorable recommendation. It was 6-2-2. We did have 2 conflicts and 2 people that had to abstain.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Ashelman?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I do have a question, actually a couple of them. Do we know why we're moving the tower from its current position?
The tower they are currently on is at the Sheriff's Department. They are reaching the end of their lease agreement. The Sheriff's Department, for the most part, have moved most of the leases on that tower to the tower they own across the street over here. I believe ultimately they would like to see the tower on the Sheriff's Department come down so they have more room for expansion and their future uses. But my understanding is AT&T is the last leaseholder on that tower, and they are preparing to move.
Is there any other spots that were considered?
You'll have to address that question to the petitioner.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Hampton.
just to clarify, when you said additional space for veterans, is that additional to where the 4 softball fields are now beyond that area, or is that the area?
I have not seen the expansion plan. I believe the applicant provided what they believe the expansion plan was in some of their supplemental materials that should have been in your packet. But I also believe there are a couple of members of the cemetery board that are here.
Yeah.
Any other questions for staff? Okay. Would the petitioner like to make a few comments?
Thank you, Mr. President. My name's
Sorry.
Steve.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Introduce yourself, and you were doing that, and I cut you off, yeah. Your name and address, please.
Yeah, Steve Rogers, 15097 Merritt Pass, Noblesville. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come before you and talk to you a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish here. I'm a 25-year Noblesville resident. My kids were born here. They go to school here. I'm engaged here in the community. I'm also a 20-year employee of AT&T, and I think we've left the lawyer at home tonight. I think, you know, in effort to try and maybe come at this from a different angle, not just what is AT&T's objective, but hopefully, at least from my standpoint as a longtime resident here, what I think is a solution that is also in the best interest of the city. I know there's been a lot of dialogue, both at the Plan Commission and after the Plan Commission meeting, and there have been many, many issues raised, public safety and the impacts on that being one of them. And obviously, there was some news coverage of that today. I think that angle has kind of been overemphasized. I am more than happy to talk about that and why we hold the views that we do. And I'm happy to talk about any other issue that came up at the Plan Commission or any other questions that you might have. But I think maybe the most productive thing for me to do is to try to focus in on the two things that may be most important as you consider this in my view, which is, one, what is AT&T doing to address the concerns that have been expressed by the veterans groups? And I think that we put forward some significant efforts on that front. And then two, why is it that we chose this site? What other sites were considered? And what is it about this particular site that we think makes it the best choice? So, as you know, veterans have spoken up against this. And I think that we do have one regret, that we didn't better anticipate the nature of these concerns. And I will say in our defense, I think it's a little difficult to try and anticipate these things because we do have cell towers that are located at other places in Indiana adjacent to cemeteries. We actually have many cell towers throughout the country that are actually located on the grounds of cemeteries. And they have not garnered these kinds of objections, and that's not in any way to suggest that these are not legitimate and that, there's something wrong here. It's just, it's hard for us to know if the concern is that they weren't reached out to ahead of time. That's a legitimate concern on their part, but it's difficult from our standpoint to anticipate those kinds of concerns when we are involved in other circumstances where those kinds of concerns have not been an issue. So once we became aware of them, we did meet with the veterans. I met with them this Saturday. Had a very, in my view, I know there are others here who will give you their view of those conversations, but I think in my view they were very productive. And I think from my standpoint, it was first and foremost important for me to be able to hear from them directly what those concerns are and try to better understand them. To try to provide whatever information I can to maybe allay some of those concerns, and then also to try and come up with some constructive solutions to those that I may not be able to necessarily allay. I think maybe the best thing to do is for me to summarize what I thought I heard in those meetings. And so there were kind of four concerns that I heard. One of them was...
Mr. Rogers, I'm sorry, we have 3 minutes, so make it kind of a quick summary. Thank you.
Real quick, there were concerns
What's
about
that?
construction equipment.
Yeah, fine.
Well, okay. Okay.
I'll try and speed it up regardless.
I was mistaken because the card was filled out as a citizen or as petitioner. I'm sorry. So is this reasonable? Okay, thank you.
You're going to be here.
Sorry.
It sounds like you're going to be here a long time anyway, so I'll try and hurry up. Four concerns I think I identified. One is concern about construction or maintenance vehicles driving over graves, potentially. That's not going to happen. We don't have a right to access the site using someone else's property. The site is going to be on the property owned by the school. It's going to be adjacent to the cemetery, but it's not going to be on the cemetery property. And so we have no legal right to access the site using their property. And actually, because the property is enclosed by a fence, I don't think there's any practical way, there's no public access that would even be feasible. So I think we can pretty clearly assure people that that's not going to be a concern at all. The second concern I heard was about noise. There is some questions about how much noise cell towers generate and in what circumstances. And I'll just tell you from our experience, there are kind of three components of the tower complex. One is the antennas. They don't emit any noise. They're the things that are sitting, 199 feet in the air. They don't emit noise. On the ground, there are cabinets that contain HVAC units, and they do emit noise. But there are industry standards that the equipment has to comply with, and our equipment is all in compliance. It's 65 decibels or less at 5 feet, which is about the sound of my voice at 5 feet. There are some things that we can do to mitigate that noise. We're perfectly willing to talk about that. Maybe perhaps, there's already going to be surrounded by a fence with screens on it. We could talk about some additional hedging or landscape, options that might mitigate that noise. But it's certainly not going to be, something that is extraordinarily disruptive in our view. And the HVAC only operates when the temperature is over 95 degrees, so it'll be on warm days when that will be an issue. The other opportunity for noise is in the backup generator, so there has to be a power source in case commercial power is lost, and we do test those generators once a week for about 30 minutes. We have the ability to schedule when that is, and we're more than happy to work with the veterans groups to make sure. So all these noise concerns appear to be related to the question of if there's a funeral going on, is there going to be something happening there that's going to be disruptive? And we're more than happy to work with them to schedule that generator testing, for late in the afternoon or at some other time when we'd be unlikely to have it going on, coincidentally when there's a funeral. The other question we had was, what about maintenance? How often do we do maintenance? And, would that potentially disrupt a funeral that would be going on? And I think that we're looking at about 1 to 2 visits a month on a typical cell site. It's not a semi-truck, it's just a service truck that would go there. So not something that's going to be, a lot of traffic or a lot of noisy traffic. There's a parking lot in this particular site that we're talking about that's located relatively close to the cemetery already, and my anticipation is, if there's going to be a traffic noise issue, it's going to be far more likely to come from the high school parking lot than from anything that would be going on at our site. And the final concern that I think that we had to address was aesthetics. And, that's not an uncommon complaint. These are not the most attractive things to look at, but they serve an important purpose. And in response to hearing those concerns, and this did come up at the Plan Commission as an option, but we weren't prepared to necessarily commit to it. But we could turn this site into a flagpole design if that were something that the remonstrators would find helpful. And so, something that obviously arguably would better fit with the adjacent property there and the use of that property. And so I've got some pictures that I can show. We have one of these at Dillon Park already. That's kind of what it looks like there. And just to show you on the inside, so that's just kind of a sheath that runs from top to bottom of the pole. And then this is a picture of what the antenna looks like that's on the inside of that sheath. And so we've actually had some simulations done that will show what this would look like on the site. And so this is taken inside the cemetery, right at the current Veterans Monument that's in the cemetery. And so you can see approximately what it would look like if you're standing at that point.
Mr. Rogers, I hate to cut you off here, but this is new information. This is not what we was committed to at Plan Commission, so I'm concerned that this is what we're proposing. We need to go back and start over.
Okay, I'm happy to drop that there. I just didn't know if the fact that that option was discussed at the Plan Commission means that it's something that could be on the table here.
Was it discussed at Plan Commission Day?
Was.
Okay.
Okay, I'm wrong again. Okay, keep going.
It was a question that was asked.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
All right.
and here's another photo. This one I think is taken from, around Monument Street, or at least from the south looking to the north of what that might look like if we did that option. So obviously, AT&T, is very concerned. It doesn't want to be associated with any kind of, perception that we're being disrespectful to veterans. We have about 10% of our workforce in Indiana as veterans. I come from a military family. So we're, obviously very concerned about that, and therefore have, I think, made the effort to try and understand those concerns better and try to be responsive to them as much as we can. The second issue that I want to maybe focus in on is why we chose the site and why we think it's the best option. Obviously, it's going to be up to you to determine, how you want to balance the concerns that have been expressed about it versus the benefits to the community, and that's totally within your purview, and what we expect you to do whatever needs to be done there, and if we have to come back and find another location, we will do that. We're trying to avoid that because there obviously be significant expense for us to do that because we have to shut this tower down at the end of October, and we will not be able to turn up a new tower if we have to change locations for at least 6 months. We have a lot of regulatory processes outside of Noblesville that we have to go through that are just going to cause a big delay there. And again, that's another thing that came up with the Plan Commission. Happy to talk about the reasons for that. I think we did not intend for this to happen. We worked very diligently to try to avoid this circumstance, and it all has to do with negotiations that we had with the county that never reached fruition. And I think if we had to do it over again, we might have recognized earlier that that wasn't going to happen, but it was all because we tried to make sure that we stayed in those negotiations as long as we possibly could, and we did not pull the plug on them until we absolutely could not meet the October 31st deadline if we didn't have a site that we could move forward with. So this is a map that shows the coverage that we have right now with the site that's on the property of the jail. And green is the best, and the purple is kind of next best, and then yellow, and then red is not so good. As you can see, coverage on, so this is the White River here. Forest Park is in this area. Federal Hill is in this area. We don't have very good coverage on the west side of downtown. That's something that obviously, ideally we would address through the building of a new tower closer to that. We don't have anything in the plan right now that I'm aware of. That's not to say a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, depending on demand, depending on other sites that we have to fund, that we couldn't do something to address that. But we can actually improve the location of the site we're trying to replace now in such a way that we don't have to add another site right away. So this shows you the improvement in coverage that we would get at the site that we have proposed. So we've gone from pretty much everything on the west side of the river being yellow to now filling it in with quite a bit of purple, leaving, and even some green around the Forest Park area. Obviously, there's a lot of new housing planned in this area. There's demand is only going to grow. And so here we have a situation where we can actually, we just came into this thinking we were going to replace the existing tower. We're actually going to improve coverage for downtown Noblesville because we're locating the tower more to the south and more to the west. If we have to choose a new location, I'm not saying we can't find something that might approximate this coverage, but we've gotten, I think, about as close as we practically can to town without encroaching on residences. Anything more to the west, we're going to have a hard time staying away from being close to residences. So the way AT&T does this is, we put a pin down on the map where we need a tower, and then we put a ring around it, and everything that's within the ring, we can, if we can find another parcel in there, then we can move it. It'll meet our circumstances. But the question is, I don't think it's going to provide as much of an upgrade to the coverage in downtown Noblesville. So I'm not sure it will be as good for Noblesville if we have to find another location. This just gives you an idea of what it looks like if we don't have any site there. And as you can see, it's a pretty big difference. So I think rather than take up any more of your time, I'll stop it there and once again express our appreciation for your consideration here and try to answer any questions that you might have.
Mr. Schwartz.
Mr. President, you did answer a few of my questions, and thank you. I do have a question, though. What is obviously, you're going to be making lease payments, I assume, to the school system. What has been the payment history like with the county?
Well, we had a dispute with the county. Around 2011, we had a contract with the county. I don't remember the payment numbers. I can probably provide that to you, but we had a dispute with the county. We needed to get some work done on the tower, and we were having trouble getting permits from the city. And the issue of renegotiation of the contract was raised. And so we were willing to renegotiate the contract even though it was midterm, even though they had agreed, to a specified term at a specified rate. They were unhappy, so we had a negotiation. We drew up a new contract, we brought it to the county, and never heard from them again. It never got signed. And we now went from, that was 2011. I think we went all the way up to 2019 before anyone at the county ever said, hey, wait a minute, you're not paying enough rent. And when they did say that, we went back and looked, and there's no contract. The contract that was in effect was the one that was in effect at the time in 2011. So we had been paying what we were contractually obligated to pay, and we told the county that.
Any other questions?
President, Mr. Rogers, if you go back to the map where it shows the green coverage and where the proposed site is now,
Where the proposed site is.
yes. Give us an estimate of where that ring is, of where
Do you know?
space?
I don't know, I didn't bring a map that shows that ring. I don't know if we have an approximation what the search ring would be. So generally, so this is the current site, and the search ring would be generally usually around a quarter of a mile around that spot.
So it could be relocated elsewhere on school property, just not right next to the softball fields, potentially.
It could be relocated to another location potentially. The issues with that is we're going to have expense to try and shore up coverage with a temporary cell while we're building the new site for about 6 months. We're going to now have to go start all the regulatory processes over for the new location, even if it's just a few feet away. And we're now going to have to, I guess, determine if someone else isn't going to remonstrate, about the new location for different reasons. So, it's not uncommon to have people remonstrate against cell towers. It's hard to locate. I mean, the bottom line is, this is a technology that people depend on, and, that dependency is only increasing. People, if you're a young person, you don't take cable TV anymore, you watch Netflix on your iPad in your basement. So people are relying to an ever greater degree on this technology today, and we have to build our facilities more densely and more close to the end user. And that's really difficult to do in a way that doesn't have someone that's upset about it. And so that would be the risk with relocating.
Other questions?
Mr. President, maybe just to dovetail with Ms. Wiles' question for Mr. Rogers. So if you did relocate on the school property, what would the delay be? Did you just?
We have a number of approvals that we have to get from various different agencies. We have to go to the FAA, we have to go to tribal authorities, we have to potentially go to the Department of Natural Resources. We have to do soil testing to make sure that the new soil is capable, from an engineering standpoint.
Carry the weight of the tower.
Yeah, just all of these, there are just many, many steps that cannot really be replicated in much less than 6 months.
And all that was done for this site?
Right. Yeah, even before approval, we try to get a head start on doing some of the work that we can while it's going through the process at the school corporation of getting the contract approved. And in the interim between that time, which I think was back in November, to now, we've been trying to do everything we can to get this thing up and running when the old tower has to be shut off.
When did I'm not sure if you'll know this, the timeline of when the veterans raised their concerns when you were in that process of doing all the work you have to do?
It was sometime around the time when it was public notice for the Plan Commission, I think. So I think that we
Well,
were,
after all that was done.
we had already gone through a public process at the school board. And in fact, when I walked the site in the summer with the schools, and, I mean, there was an awareness of the fact that the cemetery owns some of the ground. But there, I was not aware that the purpose of that was for a veteran cemetery. In fact, I can kind of show you this. I think the ground that we're talking about that's owned by the cemetery would end up, the property line would be somewhere over here. So we'd end up like 50 feet from, if they used all of the property. But as you can see right now, this is, and again, there was a question about this, they had not, to my knowledge, announced an expansion plan for the Veterans Cemetery, so we don't really know what their plans are, but we do know that this looks like, okay, that gives you a better depiction of where the property line is, so it's pretty close. But this is the Veterans Cemetery, the current section that they're using, and so, you know, again, we don't know what their expansion plan is, but you can see that it doesn't take up, you know, even a fraction of the total land area. So if they doubled the Veterans Cemetery, we're still 307 feet from that property line. And that actually reminds me of one other issue that came up in the veterans meeting. There was some concern that the tower might fall on graves. And the tower is designed to collapse on itself. I mean, it's designed to withstand, you know, 100-mile-an-hour winds. So, I mean, it would take a tornado to get it to collapse. They're engineered to collapse, you know, as close to its own footprint as it can. It's not going to fall over lengthwise. And so, even at 307 feet, there is absolutely no risk whatsoever that's going to come down on anybody's grave. And even if they extended the graves all the way to the total extent of the property line, you know, again, you know, many times the land that they're using now, I think, you know, at most it would be, I don't remember the fall zone on this particularly, but I think it's a couple of feet. I mean, it's like 3 or 4 feet, if I remember correctly, that would be actually over the property line. If it, and that assumes that it falls to that direction. I mean, it obviously can fall in any direction.
Mr. Hare?
Mr. Rogers, this is a 195-foot tower, correct?
I think it's 199 feet.
199 feet. How tall is the tower at Dillon Park?
It's probably about the same. I mean, we generally try to build towers in towns, you know, 100 to 199 feet. Outside in rural areas, we tend to go taller, but the Dillon Park tower. What's that?
I don't know the exact measurements or the exact height of that. Generally, they're under 200 feet because it's above that, they require lighting.
Wouldn't be taller than 200 feet.
And have you talked to the Cemetery Association and the veterans regarding a flagpole design?
I think we reached out, but we weren't able to meet with them, but we did, you know, we met with the veterans groups.
But you haven't had discussion with
I have not had a discussion with the board of the cemetery. I did call one of the officers last week at his office, but he wasn't available.
Mr. Boyce?
So I am unclear, and just want to be clear. If we were to require the flagpole design, does it have to go back to Planning Commission? Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Cunningham, you're on the list.
Yeah, in fact, I'm Stan Cunningham. I'm with AT&T as well. I'm from Columbus, Indiana. I was just here simply to support my colleague, Steve Rogers.
Thank you. That was less than 3 minutes. Okay. Next up is Dr. Niedermeyer. Before I embarrass myself, does Dr. Niedermeyer have 3 minutes? Okay. Okay. Thank you for saving me the embarrassment.
Hi, my name is Beth Niedermeyer, Superintendent of Noblesville Schools. My address is 16376 Anderson Way. I'm here this evening on behalf of Noblesville Schools to respectfully ask for your support for this ordinance. We've served thousands of students, staff, and community visitors in this area of the city, which includes Noblesville High School, Noblesville East Middle School, White River Elementary, the Noblesville Schools Community Center, and several athletic facilities, including our new stadium, which will be opening next school year. Reliable and consistent wireless service is important to us for several reasons, including internal and external communication systems, remote learning, and a call service between students and their parents. A disruption in cell service in this area would be a hardship for our school operations, but most importantly for our families. We were so sorry to hear that there were some residents who were not happy with the site that AT&T selected for the tower. The site was selected to provide the best coverage not only for Noblesville schools, but also for the Noblesville downtown residents as well. I want to assure all community members that placement of the tower on our property is in no way intended to be disrespectful to anyone. AT&T's recommended change to make the tower a flagpole certainly honors our veterans and our great country. Noblesville Schools holds veterans in high esteem, teaching and honoring their accomplishments and sacrifices in numerous ways in all of our schools. That's what we do. Additionally, we have many employees who are veterans themselves. We have veterans in our families, and we work closely with the armed forces to offer military opportunities for our students. So I want to thank the veterans for your wonderful service and to the council for your consideration of this. We will certainly honor the decision that you make.
President?
Yes.
I do have a comment from Ms. Niedermeyer. I just want to say thank you for everything, awesome job you did with the COVID. I've got 2 children in the system. I don't know how you could have done any better, so thank you.
Any other comments for Dr. Niemann? Questions? Okay, David Gilman is agent for the applicant. Have they properly, okay, thank you. That was less than 3 minutes. Next up, we have Matt Cook.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Matthew Cook. I live at 175 Lansdowne Drive here in Noblesville. And I'm here tonight in my capacity as Vice President of the Board of Directors of Crownland Cemetery Association. With me is also the President of the Board, Mr. Mark Roberts, also of Noblesville. Crownland came into existence in 1867, and it's housed some of our most storied residents of Noblesville, including our founder, William Connor, is buried there. But some of our most treasured, cherished spots is our veterans section of the cemetery. If you are a veteran in Hamilton County and you want one, you get a gravesite for free at Crownland Cemetery. And so just east of our existing wall is 10 acres that we're temporarily leasing to the school that has for many, many years been tasked to be the site of future expansion of our military section. And unfortunately, our military section is filling up. Within a couple or a few years, and I can't really tell you how many, it's impossible to know, we're going to have it full. We're going to have to move the fence back, and we're going to have to overtake those softball fields. Our Vietnam-era veterans are getting into their 70s and 80s. And so we think it's disrespectful, frankly, to put a 20-story tower within a few feet of military grave sites. It's also a bad place to put a tower. Whether you're talking about lightning strikes or things falling off of it or humming and noises coming from it or maintenance, it's just a bad place to put it. We don't begrudge the schools their revenue from a tower. That's fine. We need towers. We don't begrudge towers as well. But there are lots of places on land owned by Noblesville schools that would be appropriate for a tower. You don't have to put it just a few feet from veterans' military grave sites. The White River campus a block away, there's a bunch of places up there they could put it. Northfield Drive, well, you name it. So we don't object to a tower. We don't object to the school receiving the revenue. We just think it's a bad place to put it. It's disrespectful, and we would respectfully request that you ask them to put it somewhere else. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Any questions for Mr. Cook? Next up is, did you say Ron Wilson?
Ron Wilson, 2066 Field Drive here in Noblesville, Indiana. I would just like to ask the council to vote no to this G5 tower. Matt just said everything I wanted to say. The only thing I'd like to add, my mother's generation was told smoking was safe and healthy, and by 1987, I'd lost all my family because of cancer-related. my generation was told Agent Orange would not affect us. I've gone to so many funerals of friends that have died from Vietnam. Now we're being told a G5 tower is safe. I would just hate to have one of our students die from a health-related issue because of the radiation or whatever is given off by the G5 tower. So on behalf of the Hamilton County veterans, I'd just like to ask you to vote no, because as Matt said, we feel it's disrespectful not only to the veterans in this section, but also throughout the entire cemetery. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Israel Michako. Sorry if I did not pronounce your name correctly.
It's real close.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President, Council. My name is Israel Menchaca, 5589 Allison Way, Noblesville. I'm the Senior Vice Commander at the VFW Noblesville. I'm also the District 6 Senior Vice Commander for Indiana. We talked with Steve Rogers quite a bit on Saturday. Some things we agreed to disagree. The biggest thing that got us was that we were blindsided, had about a week to prepare for the last meeting. We asked if they'd shopped any other locations. They hadn't. We find it hard to believe that moving, the cell tower another 300 yards, that, where the old bus barn used to be, or somewhere else on the school property would make that big a difference. Like we said, we don't begrudge Noblesville schools the money. More power to them, probably saves us a little bit of taxes. They said all the paperwork was filed. We do know from Jimmy Regan, who works for the Historic Preservation and Archaeology at Indiana DNR, they have not filed. It says that a person may not disturb the ground within 100 feet of a burial ground for the purpose of erecting, altering, or repairing any structure, or for excavating or covering over the ground without having a development plan approved by the DNR, Division of Historic Preservation and Archaeology. While the word cemetery has been taken out of this law and only uses burial ground, this law still impacts all cemeteries. If you guys would like to see this, we have a copy of it. That's what we're going with. Their site, when all said and done with the cemetery, is expanded fully, will only be 50 feet from the fence line. That will be within 100 yards of a burial ground. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is all the comments I have, unless someone else would like to speak this evening. Mr. Yost, we got one more. Mr. Wood.
Thank you. Stephen Wood, 18828 Wimble Way, Noblesville, Indiana. I'm not here with that group, but I am going to tell you, I'm very disappointed in the possibility of a tower being there if it's going to be a burial site. So hopefully a better location can come. I know the county had offered them a parcel. Never heard anything back about that. Next thing we knew was at the school. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Any other comments? Mr. Yost, did we figure out if this person would like to speak? Okay, we don't know. Any other comments? If not, we will see you all in 2 weeks. I promised everyone a bathroom break tonight. Do we want to do it now or later?
Later.
Later. All right. Council to consider ordinance 20. Did I skip one? Council.
19.
19.
They changed.
Bottom one, first page, 19.
Okay, 19-421, council to consider ordinance 190421, an ordinance to change zoning from county zoning of AS2 agricultural subdivision district and FH flood hazard district for approximately 155 acres to R3 single-family residential, R5 multifamily residential, and FH flood hazard district for property north of East 166th Street, west of Bowden Road, and south of State Road 38, all in Wayne Township.
Motion to introduce.
Second.
We would also, you want to read these together?
Yep.
Council to consider ordinance 200421, an ordinance to change zoning for approximately 155 acres from R3 single-family residential, R5 multifamily residential, and FH flood hazard district, including the adoption of a preliminary development plan and ordinance to R3, R5 FWPD for property located north of East 166th Street, west of Bowden Road, and south of State Road 38, all in Wayne Township.
Motion to introduce.
Second.
Denise Ashelman and
Good.
Steve Harden.
Good evening again.
Thank you.
Hopefully this time Lindsay won't spoil half my presentation before I start. So, this 152-acre site is located on the west side of Bowden Road between State Road 38 and 166th Street. It's currently within the planning jurisdiction of Hamilton County and it has a agricultural zone district on it. So you can see we have most of 3 of the 4 sides of this property based on the current zoning map. The petitioner is proposing the construction of a residential subdivision of up to 375 units. The original notice for this actually went out, including a land swap with the city for some park ground. The petitioner has amended the application, so the land swap may be before you again later at some point. Those discussions have been paused to allow for the zoning to go forward, and if we reach a resolution, then the land swap conversations will happen again. The item will have to come back to you for a amendment to the zoning as well as to amend the PD. So the 375 housing units include a variety of housing types. There are townhomes in this area. This more yellow color, true yellow color is, most of us know them as duplexes. The industry term now is villas, attached villas. And then the more orange colors are single-family residential. The browner color is also single-family residential. We as a city have continued to encourage a variety of housing types since 2016 with the completion of our housing study. That housing study recommends the inclusion of multiple housing types, including those included in this development. The housing study is actually currently being updated. I actually believe you may see a draft of it in the next month. And it's going to look to see how well we've made strides towards meeting those goals in that housing study. The road layouts, lot widths and sizes, and the arrangement of the different product types has been a collaborative process between the planning and the planning department and the developer for quite some time. The development plan includes 5 areas with different types of housing products, and there is actually a chart in the staff reports on page 4 that includes the proposed bulk standards for all those different areas and their comparisons to the applicable sections of the UDO. The property where this development is proposed includes a number of older farm structures and walls, almost centrally located on the site. They're generally in the area where their planned amenity center is. The petitioner would like to maintain as many of those structures and walls as possible. They do need to be evaluated by a structural engineer to make sure that they can stay. There's an old silo. There are a bunch of old stone walls that used to be used for animal enclosures. And it's actually quite a nice property. It's actually got quite a bit of topography around the old farmstead. There is also a small family cemetery that they have had to adjust their development plan to leave it alone. So this is the old family cemetery. There are grave sites in the area dating back to pre-1900s. So they're planning to leave it in common area and undisturbed, and they've been talking to the cemetery board to make sure that they're giving it its due. The mention of the cemetery historic preservation permit actually came up with this. So yes, they do have to get a permit to disturb ground within 100 feet of a burial area. So the project was reviewed by the ARB. The board reviewed and approved the written standards for the housing types. When they amended their development plan to address the comments to make the neighboring properties happy, there was something that was left off. They are to identify for us those lots like these, where the homes back up to the rear of the homes backs up to a adjoining thoroughfare road, and they would have additional treatments for those homes, including additional corner breaks. So that will need to be amended before this ordinance gets adopted, but we will work on that before your next meeting. The staff did receive a number of emails from the neighbors, and I know many of you did too, prior to the Plan Commission meeting. The applicant made great strides in meeting with the neighbors and actually came to a resolution about 20 minutes before the Plan Commission meeting that the neighbors seemed to agree with. And most of them got up at the public hearing and said they were now in support of the project. That includes some additional landscape buffer plantings. They changed the product type that's in this area, and also maintenance of existing tree lines here, and some additional landscape plantings as well. Those changes have been added to the draft of the PD ordinance in your packet. One of the other concerns that was quite large in most of the comments was about the condition of not only 166th Street but Bowden Road from a traffic standpoint. Most of you will probably know this, but I'll just go over it again. Bowden and State Road 38 is planned in 2023 for a roundabout project by NDOT. 156th Street is planned for a roundabout in 2022. And we just received a grant recently that would fund a roundabout at 166th and Bowden. And engineering has also engaged a firm to develop 40% plans to envision what the Bowden Road corridor will look like as it becomes more of a north-south thoroughfare road for us. Staff does recommend that the rezone and the preliminary development plan be approved, and Plan Commission forwarded this to you with a favorable recommendation 10-0.
Thank you. Any questions for Denise Ashelman?
Peterson,
Yes, Mr. Ayers.
When did you say the improvements to 166th Street were going to happen?
2026.
And what were those improvements entail?
There will be a roundabout.
No, I'm talking about 166th Street, the road.
As part of this, they have to do a lane width increase on their portion of the property. So that will happen as they develop. So is this, my understanding is this most likely is their first section. They will have to widen the lane width here with that first section. It's part of the review process.
So that's a quarter mile of a 2 mile, 3 mile road.
Well, it's their section of it,
Right.
yeah.
I'm talking about, there was no discussion from engineering as far as?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President.
Mr. O'Connor.
Denise, I'm trying to make sure that I understand the land swap, so I'm looking at that drawing that you have up on the screen, and you've got the orange lots that are adjacent to Bowden. So are those, maybe this is a better question for the petitioner, but presumably with the land swap, those homes would be there, and
With the land swap, those homes would not be there, and that would be the ground that would come to us.
so this plan, which is what you were referencing, there may be
Yeah.
adjustments to the PUD?
Yeah, so there's a very real possibility that, say, this gets approved. We continue to the discussions about the land swap. Everyone says it's okay to go forward. They will come to you with a plan that this is removed. It's part of the swap, so everything east of the ditch would go to the city, and we would swap for a piece of our ground on the west side of the William Lear, on the south side of 166th Street.
Which would have to come in front of us for
Yes.
approval also.
Right. Got it. And this would be proposed to start when? I mean, just assuming it's approved, but when would the dirt start?
I sent a meeting invite to schedule pre-filing for sections 1 and 2 today. They would like to start construction probably yesterday. Not that everyone we talk to doesn't say that, but they are very much ready to start construction on this project.
I'm trying to dovetail to Mr. Ayers' question about timing on 166th Street and the build-out. You got 375 lots, and it may take them a year just to get the infrastructure in there, so maybe that puts you at the end of 22, and you start building homes, so just try to be cognizant.
I will
of
say,
timing
most
on
subdivision
improvements.
sections we see, if they hit the construction season right, they can have roads in the ground, lots ready to go, somewhere around the 6-month mark. We have some that take much longer than that, they just hit delays. But they could, in theory, get approval from our department and the other city departments and be constructing homes within 6 months. A lot of it depends on when they get their approvals, though.
That's all I had, thank you.
Can I, Mr. President, I just want
Yes,
to follow
Mr.
up on
Hampton.
that. So just based on what they're saying there, the homes are going to be 3 to 4 years ahead of the improvements on 166.
So the improvement to their portion of 166 is required with the construction
As
of
they
that
do it.
first section.
Okay. And but there's no plans for the city to,
No.
well, and on Bowden Road, the potential improvements to that thoroughfare, that's how far away? Is there any magic ball that tells us?
I don't have a timeline on that, no, other than I know that they're asking for those 40% plans to be developed, which my understanding from them is that really gives them an idea of what their vision should be.
But the roundabout would be in 2025, correct?
2026.
2026,
And that's a
okay.
federal grant, so that timeline's pretty tied down.
Those are the timelines that were identified without an impetus to adjust those. So I guess now that we have a project, we can, I guess, revisit the capital plan and maybe get those in a more timely fashion. If
Depends on how, big Will's checkbook is.
Right. But this will generate significant road impact fees and sewer impact fees.
Yes,
Cost of $8 million a mile, you have to calculate in what those road impact fees will do.
and they'll obviously be subject to the road impact fee goes up August 1st, so.
Any other questions for staff? Petitioners here, would you like to pile on? Sorry, add to the, please speak.
For the record, my name's Sam Swafford. I'm an associate at the law firm of Fagery Drinker. Happy to be here tonight representing MI Homes. Here tonight with MI is John Isaacs, and from my office, Steve Harden. I think Denise gave an excellent overview of the project, about where the project's located, a little bit of the background. the procedure, as well as what's going to be encompassed within this project in this community. I don't want to add too much, just maybe a little bit more about the procedure and the updates a little more specifics on the updates that have occurred since this was last before the council. We were here before the council in an introduction on February 23rd. There we went through the specifics of the project, the different housing options that are going to be available within the community. March 2nd, like Denise said, the home plans and floor elevations were in front of the ARB, which they gave a favorable recommendation for as we moved on. On March 4th, MI held a virtual neighbor meeting with the adjoining property owners, and between March 4th and the March 15th Plan Commission, John had met with those neighbors multiple times just to discuss what the buffer is going to look like between Silo Ridge, which is the community, and Highlands at Stony Creek, which is the community just west of Silo Ridge. So you got Silo Ridge here, and then Highlands at Stony Creek. Just before the Plan Commission meeting on March 15th, there was an agreement on a variety of issues about what that buffer is going to look like. We read those agreements into the record at the Plan Commission. We then incorporated it into the PD ordinance, which is before you tonight. And the neighbors actually signed off on what that language looks like and what is before you right now. We then held the public hearing on March 15th. Staff gave a favorable staff report, and the Plan Commission forwarded the request with a unanimous favorable recommendation, which brings us here to tonight. And then the only other update that I just wanted to bring up is that within the past couple of days, the city reached out to MI to collaborate with MI regarding the installation of some sewer improvements along the north side of the property. MI is willing to collaborate with the city, and then we expect that we'll provide some more specifics on that 2 weeks from now. But we're happy to answer any questions you might have, but otherwise, we will plan on seeing you in 2 weeks.
Any questions?
I do have one, Mr.
Yes,
President.
Mr. Hampton.
I'm trying to, I don't know if the code here is telling me what color. If the land swap happens, the homes that are there along Bowden Road, that's how many, and if it moves to the other place, what's the difference in numbers, if there is a difference?
I believe the last plan when the land swap was occurring, it was around 42 lots, I believe, and then currently for that. Yeah.
And
so
what
it'd just
is
be
it without it?
375.
Okay.
So.
Okay, I didn't find it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Peters,
Yes, Mr. Aaron.
the townhome project that's interior of this, have you provided any additional parking? You've got a 20-foot front yard setback, which might allow 2 cars at best, and
Yeah.
we tend to notice that people don't use garages for cars anymore. We have several units there, and I don't see in the plan here any additional parking on site other than on the street. We've run into that problem with parking on the street down Deer Path with the school buses, trash pickup, mailman, and all that.
Yep.
Has there been any additional thought of putting any additional parking there?
There's not. I think at this time, though, we've got, the streets internal to the townhomes, just like the rest of the single-family homes and the paired villas. The right-of-way widths are to city standards, so you're going to have that wide right there, and then plus each townhome, you got the 2-car garage plus the driveway.
Yeah, but where we run into problem is the on-street parking just tends to be an issue.
Any other questions? Mr. O'Connor, did you have a question?
I did. I had 2. Thanks, Mr. President. Mr. Swafford, welcome.
Thank you.
What is the percentage breakdown on the different types of homes? I may have missed it, but I've been looking for that, and I can't. Between the villas, the prestige, what is I could have done the math, but I didn't count.
Yeah.
I've got the color code, but I don't have the.
Yeah. So the general breakdown, we've got Area B, we've gotten broken up into almost 2 subsections there, which is the single-family detached. You're going to have a maximum of 167 there total. Then from the built villas, you're going to have 100 units, and then the townhomes, 66 units. And then east of the ditch, which I'm kind of considering at its own separate category, is 42 units, or 42 homes.
So the prestige, which are the maroon? Is that right?
B1, would that be B1?
The Prestige series has been that was part of the agreement with the adjoining property owners to the west. So the lots identified with the black circle here, those are going to be the Prestige Series based upon the agreement with the residents of Highlands at Stony Creek.
And then these down by detention area, what is that, 1? Those will just
Right
be Smart Series?
Correct.
Okay. Trying to get an idea of where the price points were and then the amenities area, I was looking for, I think we may have looked at that when you were in here for introduction, but I'm not.
Here's just kind of a general sampling of the amenities area.
There it
In the
is.
very center of the community here with pool, farmhouse, and trying to keep that lure of what's currently out there in the
And
history
the
of the
silo
sector.
that's there is you gonna try to renovate it?
I think that's the
Is that the intent?
As of now, yes.
Any other questions? I have not received any comments from the adjoining communities since the Plan Commission meeting. Does anyone here want to speak from any of those communities? Thank you. Any other questions? If not, we will see you in 2 weeks.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Swope.
Mr. Isaacs wants to speak. You're good? All right. Okay. Council to consider.
Want to take a break?
I'm fine. Got a hollow leg. Anybody? Should we?
There's one, you might as well at least get through the next one before you take one. It's
Council-
it's part of this project.
Never mind. No, this is not the next one. We did those two together.
Oh, you did those two
Yeah,
together?
yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna keep going. Council to consider ordinance 210421, an ordinance to amend the zoning commitments for the Noblesville Business Park for property at 9580 East 156th Street.
Motion to introduce?
Second.
Mr. Herschel.
Yes, good evening, council members. I think it's time for a relatively simple one.
We'll make it complicated.
This is a request to add a distribution business as a permitted use within the Noblesville Business Park, located northeast of State Road 37, 146th Street intersection. The ordinance that established the Noblesville Business Park originally in 1997 contains two contradictory passages, one in the preamble that supports distribution businesses in the park, and one in the actual ordinance part that prohibits distribution businesses in the park. A specific business wishes to locate on this site in question, and the proposal is to amend ordinance 49-12-97 that created the business park to enable the siting of distribution businesses. So the property is zoned planned business. The distribution business wishes to locate on the 2.5-acre site. This business buys cable ties and related products in bulk and then sells them in smaller lots. Business will not feature delivery of raw materials such as rolls or sheets of plastic. Manufacturing of the cable ties is not proposed on site. Business would have approximately 15 employees, 2 to 3 semi-delivery trucks per day, operating hours from 8 to 5, normal operating hours, and 1 truck dock and 2 additional overhead doors on the building's east side. So it's not a very intense use. It has not been to TAC yet. I do have elevation drawings and site plans to show you if you want, but again, it has not been to TAC. It will be going to TAC later if it's approved. So, as indicated, the ordinance that establishes the park specifically prohibits distribution businesses. But we believe as staff and the Plan Commission agreed that the preamble clearly shows the intent to allow distribution businesses in the park. Plan Commission recommends approval of the application with no dissenting votes, a 10-0 vote with no conditions.
One comment, this is an existing Noblesville business that is growing in Noblesville, so this is a success story.
Correct.
Thank you for that lead in. And the garage doors loading docks do not face 156th or North Point. Is
That's
that
correct.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. President, just
Mr.
one,
O'Connor.
I'm presuming the building will meet all the building requirements in the CCPD once you see it.
It will have to be. Right now, there's currently proposed a ribbed edge metal side on the interior. That's not going to be allowed unless it's reviewed by a review committee. But there, again, that has to go through TAC, and it'll be reviewed at that point. Yeah.
Any other questions? We will see you for the next item, but in 2 weeks for this one. We're on a roll here. So council to consider ordinance 220421, an ordinance to change zoning from I2 heavy industrial to R5 multifamily residential for approximately .28 acres at 1684 Hannibal Street.
Motion introduced.
Second.
Mr. Herschel.
Yes. This may take a little longer. This is a request to change the zoning on the property in the northwest corner of the intersection of Hannibal Street and 17th Street from its current I2 heavy industrial classification to the R5 multifamily zoning classification. Purpose is to allow the addition of a third dwelling unit within the building. The original building was approved in 1994 after the Board of Zoning Appeals granted a land use variance for the property to allow the 2 dwelling units. In fact, the approval was for a multi-purpose building to include an art studio and gallery, that would be on the first floor, a motorhome storage bay, and 2-bedroom apartments, 2 two-bedroom apartments on the second floor. Also approved at that time were variances for parking setbacks from the front and side setback lines. There are some site features that are in violation of the 1994 variance and/or the UDO currently. If you want details on those, I'll go into those tonight. I don't really plan on doing that. What we've done is asked that we ask the Plan Commission to impose conditions of approval or recommendation on their motion. So in other words, if you follow the Plan Commission's recommendation tonight, the approval or the eventual approval would be contingent on those zoning violations being resolved. So the proposal is to convert the approved first floor uses to a third dwelling unit within the building. Of course, there would have to be structural changes to the building. That would include addition of egress windows on the first floor. There will be 6 parking spaces required, and there's room on the property to provide those spaces. The comprehensive plan is, can't be said to support or be against this. Let me try to rephrase that. So the comprehensive plan classifies this property as traditional residential, most predominant land use being single-family residential. It does call for a mixture of housing, but then says multifamily development is inconsistent with the desired character of that neighborhood. So comprehensive plan doesn't really support it, but there are 3 arguments that do support it. First, the building was approved and built for 3 user spaces. It has that now. Second, the multifamily use serves as a good transition from the I-2 to the east, between that and the R4 to the west. And third, when you think about multifamily uses, this is not what you think of. So this is the lightest multifamily use you could possibly have on this property. So those 3 things go for it. Plan Commission recommended approval by a 10-0 vote with 3 conditions. Again, 2 of those that would clear up 2 zoning violations on the property, and then the 3rd condition to take steps to cause the first floor to be brought up to current building code standards. And that's all I have.
Good. Any questions for Mr. Herschel? O'Connor.
Thank you for that well-informed presentation. I appreciate that. I'm trying to get a handle on how many square feet is this improvement?
The
building
plan,
itself? Trying to wrap my head around 3 units. I've seen I've been by the site. I know
Right.
I know the location, but
2 upstairs units are 700 square feet each.
okay.
Lower is,
Apartment size.
yeah, probably 1,000 on the lower. That's without the RV storage area.
Actually, was in this building recently, and the apartments upstairs are actually fairly well laid out, and the artist studio really felt like an apartment. So it really, this is a better use for how this was designed. I don't know how it ever got approved the other way, but it felt like it felt like an apartment. And they were fairly well laid out and pretty nice. Any other questions? Thank you. We will see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Okay, how about now? You want to take a little 5-minute break? Do it. Okay, 5 minutes. And we'll come back. Council to consider, welcome back. Council to consider ordinance 230421, an ordinance for special consideration for the operation of a contractor's office in the corporate campus plan development district at 10784 East 141st Street.
Motion to introduce.
Second.
Good evening. The item before you is a special consideration for a contractor's office at this location. It is approximately 900 feet east of Howe Road, between Howe and, again, Promise Road. It is on the north side of the street. To the south of this property is the city of Fishers, and as you can see, there are residential subdivisions to the south. Currently on the site is what was originally a single-family dwelling that was occupied by the original contractor when this originally came before the council back in 2008. There is also a garage that is basically just to the west of the house. And then on the property in the rear is the pole barn that was eventually constructed by the original property owner. The new contractor is basically proposing to operate his business from this location. In previous ordinances, we had tied the contractor's operation specifically to a specific contractor. A lot of that was done because we didn't know how quickly this portion of the corporate campus was going to develop. Ultimately, probably what will happen with this property, once there is sufficient infrastructure to the site to, particularly in this area, to support new development, this 1.25 acres will probably be purchased by, a bigger entity and then fully developed. This is a part of the corporate campus. It is currently has a land use of industrial office. Again, the contractor does mostly roofing and snow removal. He is proposing to basically do some improvements to the site. Those improvements include paving the parking area and the driveway entrances. He's also intending to basically do a vision block fence for security purposes around the property. And again, his equipment and stuff will be stored in the accessory building. This was sent to you with a favorable recommendation for adoption by the Plan Commission by a 10-0-0 vote.
Any questions for Ms. Sheldon?
Peterson?
Yes, Mr. Ayer.
Ms. Sheldon, isn't this a property we had issues with a few years ago regarding outside storage and equipment? I think it was an electrical contractor.
He was, okay, originally it was an electrical contractor, and originally it came to us as a zoning violation. The individual had lived there, had operated his business from the site, which was okay because he basically was there prior to us bringing this into our corporate limits. So his use could exist there. He at some point moved away from the site and just continued to operate the business there, which then became a violation, and that's how originally he came before this the commission and the council. This property has been sold twice since that property owner. That original property owner did come back a couple of times because there was a time limit on the ordinance that said, I think the first year we approved it, they had a year. The next time they came back either 3 to 5 years, it was 5 years later, and had to basically kind of renew the operation. It did take them approximately, I think it was about 2 years, maybe 3 years to even build the accessory pole barn that they talked about originally. So, again, yeah.
What are the conditions regarding outside storage with this zoning?
So-
That was the big issue, I think, at the time, was there was a lot of equipment being stored outside, and it just wasn't kept up.
Right. He did have equipment outside, and that was, again, part of the original zoning violation that we had on this property. This contractor, again, intends to keep his equipment inside that pole barn. Again, he is planning on fencing the area for security purposes also. So we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, if it becomes an issue with outside storage, you know, that it becomes a zoning violation, and we will pursue it.
And they're paving the, current gravel lots are going to be paved.
That is what we have been told.
Is that a condition?
It shows on his site plan that is a part of the ordinance, so yes, it is a condition.
To answer your question, the original zoning violation was in 2008. We granted an extension of 1 year in 2013, 3 years in 14, 3 years in 17. So we're at the end of the 7-year extensions.
Speaking of that, is there a time frame attached to this or no?
There is not. We did not even, we didn't tie it to this specific contractor, and we didn't tie it to a time frame. Again, the property is zoned industrial office, which, you know, allows this type of use. A special consideration is something that we bring before the Plan Commission and Council, because sometimes there are additional requirements that we would like to see.
Any other questions?
I think Joyce Ann said it right. At some point, this will probably get redeveloped and it'll get bought, but this was one of the first things I recall seeing when I first sat behind this dais, and it's been going on ever since. But utilization's been about the same. It just depends on, you know, who, roofing contractor, electrical contractor. Is Duck still in business?
Yes.
Adjacent to,
Immediately
right?
next door to this
Yeah.
is another one that we granted a contractor's office to. Duck's is still in business there and still operates from that location today.
Is there fencing around that one?
No.
No.
Seems like every time we extended this, we inch a little closer towards, now we got a fence, now we got asphalt, so we're making progress.
It's one of those things that just seems like we zoned it corporate campus that many years ago, and you're just stifling it if you don't allow something to go in there.
Yep. Lose your taxes. And
Yeah, I mean, the corporate campus came about in the year 2000, so,
We're still probably 10 years from getting something adjacent to this property,
probably because we don't have a lot of infrastructure in this area,
right?
and it's quite a distance to extend that infrastructure.
And it's pretty much residential, I think, across there. It's all residential across the street. So as long as it's kept up, I don't have an
Right.
issue, you know, with it.
You know, I will say that we received no telephone calls, or no one was at the Plan Commission meeting either to speak for or against this proposal.
no one from Fisher showed up?
No.
Okay. Any other questions? See you back in 2 weeks. Okay, now you want me to read these next two together?
Yes, please.
Council to consider ordinance 240421, a change of zoning from the land use category of community and sub-district overlays of internal and 146th Street corridor to a land use category of single-family residential with a sub-district overlay of mixed residential, all a part of corporate campus plan development district for approximately 56 acres west of Maryland Road and north of 141st Street.
Motion to introduce.
Second.
Council to consider ordinance 250421, the adoption of a plan development overlay and ordinance for the land use category of single-family residential with a sub-district category of mixed residential for approximately 56 acres, all a part of the corporate campus plan development district west of Maryland Road and north of 141st Street.
Motion to introduce.
Second.
Joyce Ann Yelton.
Thank you. Again, this piece of property is located adjacent to Maryland Road and 141st Street. It currently is, again, a part of the corporate campus. The category, the land use category that this is currently under is community. The community category was set aside for those areas that basically had floodplain on them or wetlands, and we didn't feel at that initial time that they would be developed and that they might become possibly parkland in the future. Obviously, the applicants have come back to us with a proposal to, I'm going to say, change the land use category. It would go from what is known as community and internal sub-district along with another sub-district of 146th Street corridor. And those two sub-districts regulate what the architecture of the property would be, basically how it would look. As well as landscaping requirements. So when we basically are requesting, or they're requesting to change the land use category to single family, it comes along with what we call a mixed use overlay. That is the first ordinance. The second ordinance that was introduced this evening basically has to do with the residential plan development. Again, it is for 56 acres. It would include 135 total home sites. On this property, as you can see by this development plan, they are proposing 3 different housing types. We basically have an alley load product, which is the area here in the pink. We have lots in the purple, which are 50-foot wide lots, and then we have basically larger lots in this area, which are 65-foot wide lots. Again, the 36-foot wide lot is an alley load product. This item did go before the Architectural Review Board. These are some of the character exhibits of the proposed houses that would be built. That's an example of the 36-foot wide lot. This is an example of the character exhibits for the 50-foot wide lots. And then this would be a character exhibit for the 65-foot wide lots. Going back to the development plan here, just a couple notes. All of the streets within this development are basically built to city standards.
In a new
Alley
plan?
widths, no. This is what we saw at the plan commission. 20-foot alleys is the biggest difference.
Okay.
That's what they saw at plan commission.
So anyway,
Are there private roads in this or not? Because there's state, what I've got says private roads.
okay, so there are no private roads in here. Your alleys are basically 20 feet. That 20 feet of the alley basically has been what we require for, I'm going to say, fire trucks. And that's basically usable. The rest of the area here is basically public streets that are built to city standards. They are proposing to maintain approximately, basically most of the area here that you see currently in green that is wooded and it has wetlands and some little bit of floodplain on it will be maintained as such. Again, there will be internal trailways as well as the external trailways that we would require. They have provided additional parking for the alley load product. Here's some additional parking, here's additional parking. I think those are the only 2 areas of additional parking that they have basically proposed. Again, this was sent to you from the Plan Commission with, again, a favorable recommendation for adoption. There were, I want to say, within the ordinance, they do have their architectural, I'm going to say, bulk standards in there as well as an anti-monotony. They did provide the character elevations within there. And they also noted within the ordinance any waivers that they were seeking.
I did want to note, at the ARB, we did ask that the corner lots have the two-sided architecture, or not, the backs, anything facing a public way, we would not grant the waivers. And also on the 36-foot lots, we added an extra material, and
Pink lots.
the pink lots, and then, if you'll note, they got rid of one of the parking lots, they widened the alleys, and I feel like they've come a long way from the introduction and from the Plan Commission. But, any other comments? Mr. Ayer?
I think they have helped somewhat, but, you've got a 36-foot wide lot, 10-foot front yard setback, which you're not going to park in the front yard, and a 3-foot rear yard setback. And so I think they've accommodated half of their 36 lots, maybe with the parking, but I don't think they've addressed anything on the north end.
Mr. Skelton raised his hand there. Any other questions for Joyce Ann? Ms. Shelton? Staff? Commissioner would like to speak?
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, members of the council, Mr. Mayor. I'll spare some of the formalities here and get right into some responses.
Start with your name and
Sure, Matt Skelton with Churchill and Antrim.
Thank you.
With 2 North 9th Street here in town. And I have development team members here in the audience to support if we have questions. To answer the parking question, I'll just highlight the changes that have been made since last time we were before you. We did receive a warm response from our neighbor meeting, which I updated at the last council meeting when we introduced. We were last before you on February 9th. ARB on February 17th. Those changes that were mentioned from the ARB have been incorporated into the ordinance that's before you this evening. We received a lot of good input at the council introduction, and we incorporated changes. I'll just move this around. We incorporated changes to try to address the items that the council. Oh, thank you. Is it good? That's okay. That's all right. Sorry about that. We incorporated changes to address the items that were raised. There were a few questions about parking and how that has been addressed in the area of the pink lots. This northern portion has all been reconfigured, so those lots, all of those are, of course, rear load homes. So they're vehicularly accessed from the rear. But every one of those lots is designed so it has 2 off-site parking spaces and the 2 garage spaces. So everything north of here, this area here, just like a normal subdivision lot, can park 2 cars in front of the garage. There's a 20-foot area to do that, and 2 inside. The area to the south meets the same city requirement for 2 guest spaces per home. They're just, instead of being in front of the garages, they're in these 2 parking areas that are dispersed throughout that southern area. So that's how that was addressed. And then also there's opportunity for on-street parking, just like on a normal subdivision street, where that can be accommodated. There's opportunities for that in here as well. As noted, the alleys, we've gone through technical advisory committee now since your last meeting, and we were able to work with the city departments, not the least of which was the fire chief, and we were able to reconfigure the plan to create 20-foot alley load, or alleys, which alleviated the concern with the alley width. And then the streets, as noted, have all been constructed or are being designed to meet the city cross-section, so they're all public street cross-sections now. The corner lots, as noted, have all been, this accurately shows the corner lots all being reconfigured to comply with the city's corner lot standards, standards. And then lastly, we were able to, if you compare this to the old plan, we were able to loosen this up in here where the entrance is. Unlike over here where the lots are right on the right-of-way, we were able to free things up here in this area because we just think that it provides a little bit better view shed. As you're traveling along Maryland Road, you can actually see into the neighborhood instead of peering between homes. So it just creates a better view shed. So that's the extent of the changes that have been made since you saw this last. Again, we had no remonstrance at the Plan Commission hearing. We did receive a 10-0 unanimous favorable recommendation. We'd love to begin developing as soon as we can get through the processes and would entertain any questions that you might have. Thank you.
I remember right at the Plan Commission meeting, some of the setback requirements were actually because of a right-of-way taking. In other words, it does meet 30 feet, and then eventually, when they do the taking, it's particularly along Maryland Road.
Yeah, it does, and there's no, we're still complying with all landscaping standards, so there's no request to reduce those.
Thank you.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes, Mr. Aaron.
With a minimum rear yard setback at 3 feet, Mr. Skelton, doesn't that give you the ability to build up to 3 feet, within 3 feet of that property line?
Within the lot, yes, not the property line.
Say it again, Mr. Aaron.
If you have a 3-foot rear yard setback, I assume that's from your lot line. So in other words, you've got your alley load garage, you can build within 3 foot from the alley.
This says side yard. I don't see the rear yard 3 feet.
Well, look under 36, go back to the second to the bottom line, above 1,750 square feet.
I'm going to let.
Maybe I've got the wrong
Which page are you on?
I don't know.
You've got,
Page 3-25. They're not going to coincide.
I'm going to let our engineer respond to your question.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
he brought reinforcements.
Oh, here we go. I see.
He designed it.
Ed Hamilton, 17451 Natchez Court, Noblesville, Indiana. The courtyard lots, they're deeper than the rest of the 80-foot lots. So those ones will have a 10-foot rear yard setback. And then with the standard, now that it's not a private road, it's a public road, the standard right-of-way width, there's an additional 11 foot from the back of curb to the property line. So it'll be 21 feet from the back of curb.
The rear yard setback would be 21 feet?
The rear yard setback will be 10 feet, but from the curb to the home, it'd be 21, so that's the space for two
So
cars to park.
you can write that in the standards, because at 3 foot with this approved, you can build a house within 3 foot of that,
Okay.
based on what we have here.
Yeah, we'll put that in the standards, yeah. And there's a correction too, I think it's 5 foot it should be 5 feet for the rear yard setback everywhere, except for the courtyards, it'll be 10 feet. All right, thanks.
I don't know that 10 feet accommodates a car, but
10 plus 10, 10 plus 11, 21 feet does. It won't fit your RV, but. Any other questions? It's getting late. I'm getting.
Mr. O'Connor has a question.
Yes, Mr. O'Connor.
Mr. Skelton, I'm looking at the 36-foot product, and I'm sure ARB covered this, but just for my edification, what materials will be used on these? I'm assuming hardy plank and brick, stone, whatever the...
We required some brick on the front and at least 2 other textures of hardy plank, whether it be shakes or siding. 3 materials, is that
correct?
Yeah, that's what we approved at ARB.
Yeah, and this exhibit is, I think, somewhat misleading at the risk of opening a can of worms here, but these are actual lots that are shown here, not the dimensions of structures.
Right.
Yeah.
You have a builder identified for these?
David Weekly Homes.
Weekly?
They're,
themselves, yeah.
they're
Okay.
here in the audience.
They're not, are they on the whole project?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
These are their product that you're seeing in the ordinance.
I didn't know where they were doing the other lots on the other side of.
No, they intend to develop, well, we intend to develop, they intend to build all the homes.
All right,
Yes.
thank you.
All I had.
Other questions? No other questions? We will see you back in 2 weeks.
Thank you, folks.
Council to consider ordinance 260421, an ordinance to consider a government use overlay, including the adoption of an ordinance and development plan for the construction of a Hamilton County parking garage located at 225 North 9th Street.
Motion to introduce.
Second.
Joyce Ann Yelton.
The item before you is basically a request to create a government use overlay on the property that basically is bounded by Clinton Street between 8th and 9th Street. The property is currently used as a parking lot. It is a surface parking lot for the Hamilton County employees. They're proposing to construct a 5-story parking garage on this location to basically for parking for their county employees. They have, at the Plan Commission, their original site plan did not show a sidewalk on 8th Street. They did agree to that. They are seeking a waiver from the maximum height requirements, and the height requirements deals with the two-story, with the two structures at either end. That is actually approximately 60 feet. The maximum height in this area is 50 feet. The actual garage is below that maximum height requirement. This was sent to you with a favorable recommendation for adoption by the Plan Commission.
Are those the elevators on
Yes.
both ends?
There is an elevator,
There's
yes.
stairs, stairwells.
An elevator and
And
stairwells, that
elevators.
is correct.
And that is another level of parking at the very top.
Yeah, you're seeing the crash wall at the top.
Okay.
Any other questions?
It's big, very, very big.
Is petitioner here? Mr. Wood, would you like to speak?
Very, very
You
large.
came all this way.
Mr. Wood, have any
I'm sure
comments?
he'd like to come up and speak.
We appreciate you staying all this time.
I wouldn't miss this. It's a little bit easier for me here. Steve Wood, representing Hamilton County. I live at 18828 Wembley Way, Noblesville. Mr. Anderson is with Garmong. We did bring a couple of structure pictures. He is also a
Nice.
Noblesville resident. This is a 5-story parking garage. One of the towers is an elevator, one of them is a stairwell. It does have a lot of possibilities for the city of Noblesville, but that's a discussion with the commissioners and the mayor for events. We are requesting that we can move on with this project. Any questions I can help you with? We did match the brick and the stone the best we could to match the old courthouse.
What's the capacity of the garage?
Yeah, 480 with the 5th story. That way, if we did the future expansion on the judicial center at any time, we've allowed enough parking for that.
What's your day one immediate needs?
Day one of me needs
40?
Yeah, I think it was 340.
Okay.
340, 350, depending on which day, or if COVID's going on, or, yeah.
Sure.
Weekend parking,
That'll be discussion with the mayor and the commissioners.
Peterson,
Yeah, Mr. Here.
the north side of the building, what do you propose for the, is it the same look all the way around, or?
On the back side, it is a little bit different. The brick goes to about this point, and then it opens for you this point, and the other end is the same way. There's a house that's placed on that north corner. It will cover that, so that's what they'll see. We have talked with them and talked with the Rollins as well.
That's page A211 in your packet, by the way. The brick does wrap the corners.
Yep. commissioners were very adamant about having a look that would work downtown.
Yeah, this
How many
seems
more people is he gonna add?
slightly different than it was the last time we saw it. It seems like it was adjusted, is that correct?
The fifth floor.
Fifth floor was added.
Fifth floor.
I know the fifth floor is added, but the actual scheme looks different, is it not?
No,
No.
it's the same scheme, but the colors are,
More
what you
accurate?
see now are the permanent pick colors, right? So we had that variation color, so you're
It was
seeing a
little
better look.
darker, little darker brick was what we
Yeah,
saw
it was,
before.
yeah. So this is more accurate. I know.
That's more accurate, correct.
Okay.
I didn't know Mr. Wood had
Yeah,
a
it-
color palette quite that attractive.
I do not, and if you remember correctly, my wife will tell you that as well.
We also discussed, depending on our streetscape plan, is there still room to adjust the streetscape if we need to make it in coordination with our proposed streetscape? I mean, there's still some opportunity to discuss that.
There's still opportunities there, yes.
President, what's the status of the alley behind?
The alley will stay there.
Okay.
That needs to be an access point, A, for the neighbors there and for the water company as well. There'll be a time when we're doing construction, they'll be shut down a little bit, but it stays open. Joyce Ann was very adamant about that.
Liz,
Yes, she is very
is
adamant.
there still a cross out, is there still a cross alley across there for the BMO, or what used to be, not the Metro Bank site?
The old Metro Bank
Is
alley,
there-
it has
is
been
it
there
all
for
the-
years, yeah.
It's
it
all
has been-
abandoned?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I think we finished that all up.
Construction to start?
Early May is our anticipated, is what we'd like to do. The sooner the better.
Mm-hmm.
What are you looking at?
That's a
Construction
long.
Probably 12 to 14 months if weather cooperates.
Board in place?
Precast?
Place parking garage with precast.
Yes.
16 months is our worst-case scenario, that's what we're anticipating. Yeah, so I would anticipate 14
When are they
months.
gonna start on the East Bank project? When will you be off of that project, as far as your parking goes?
August is the,
August, yeah. That's whenever that deal closes, and then that's when we'll be off it.
August.
And we'll be shuttling people from the Kalo lot. We've worked with the schools and the boys club to shuttle employees to the buildings to eliminate walking traffic as much as possible across Connor Street Bridge.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate
Appreciate it. If any other questions? If not, thank you again.
President, and this might be a better question for the council, but since you're here, how are you on with the funding of the fifth floor? Is that?
It's already been approved.
Oh, it has been approved?
Yeah. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't. We have just as you as a council that is does their job very well, just as you guys do, and I would not come here if I didn't have approval.
you're pandering now, Mr. Wood.
Thank you very
Any
much.
other questions?
No.
Thank you. We will see you
Very
in 2
nice.
weeks.
Thanks for your patience.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks for sticking around. Okay, council to consider ordinance 270421 and ordinance to consider a government, I just read, no, wait a minute, government use overlay, including adoption of an ordinance and development plan for the Fire Station 74 at 20777 Hague Road.
Motion introduced.
Second.
Joyce Ann Yelton.
This is a request to basically bring fire station number 74 under the government use overlay as part of our update, I guess, to this particular station. This particular station, when it was constructed, was built back in the 90s. At that time, it was zoned planned business, which it is still currently zoned today. And they had to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals and seek variances for several items. The applicant is proposing to basically build onto the existing fire station. If you're familiar with the site, this area back here has some, I think there's like 4 parking spaces back here. And this area here is currently a landscape area. These will be the 2 areas that the additions will include. This is a elevation rendering of, if you were looking at this from the parking, from southeast at the parking lot entry. This area in here would actually be the new addition. Brick, the architecture will all match what's existing there. This is a close-up look of the actual addition that would be facing towards the south there. This item basically, again, was sent to you from the Plan Commission with a recommendation for adoption. The variances that were originally granted by the BZA will become a part of the ordinance requirements. So they will basically move from what are known as variances before the Board of Zoning Appeals. They become waivers in this ordinance. Some of those waivers included the front yard setback, included a parking lot setback, the minimum drive width was another waiver. There's a new waiver, though. They will be encroaching into a drainage and utility easement on the south side. That is basically they're encroaching with pavement, not with a building. And they are asking for a waiver to reduce the required parking lot setback from what is 20 feet again to 18 feet. Again, that is along the south side because they are basically adding some additional parking out in this area along the south side. Again, it was sent to you with a favorable recommendation for adoption. Chris Gellinger with the Fire Department is here if you have any specific questions.
You've waited this long. Would you like to speak? Any questions for Joyce Ann Yelton? Thank you.
Hi, Chris Kellinger, represent Noblesville Fire Department. I can't add much more to what she's already said, but I'd be welcome any questions.
This is to accommodate female firefighters. I forget the two program requirements.
Correct, and just improve the station hadn't been touched since it's been built. It's just time for some upgrades and to make it larger. We're certainly getting bigger, so.
Connor.
More living space, Chief, is that primarily what this
Mainly
is?
Sleeping quarters, and the kitchen area is going to be improved. And I think presently the kitchen's 74 square feet. We're going to add to that a little bit, so.
Bays are adequate, but.
Nothing on the bay, we're not changing the bays, we're just fixing them up a little bit.
Okay.
Tiny in there. I've been in there a few times, and it is pretty tiny now that I think about it.
74 square feet?
Yeah, it's pretty small. It's worked fine for years, but we've just outgrown it.
Everything must be in a circle.
You ain't standing up. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for waiting.
Does this have to pass this?
We, Council to consider ordinance 280421, an ordinance establishing the American Rescue Plan Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund.
Motion to introduce.
Second.
Mr. Spalding.
Yeah, way past his bedtime.
Mr. President, members,
Should you take a nap and then come back?
feel all refreshed.
He's been in his office.
Mr. President, members of the council, Jeff Spalding, CFO and Controller, and this is a relatively simple ordinance for a bigger issue, which you're all familiar with, which is the American Rescue Plan and the dollars being allocated to that. Well, to manage that, and also based on a specific directive from the State Board of Accounts, there is a requirement that each local unit of government establish a fund for this purpose, and then there are requirements related to that fund, and the ordinance lays out those requirements, also provides up in the whereas clauses a little bit of that background information regarding why the fund's being created. This will establish this fund officially in city code. I suppose the most important things you need to know about the creation of the fund is that in the provisions, it identifies both the eligible uses of the money once received, and also that based on the existing version of the law, that the fund will sunset on December 31, 2024, because there's a requirement that the monies be expended by that time. And then the last thing I'll say is
we have been working with with Lindsay in the legal office and some outside counsel on ensuring that we get the language specifically correct in this ordinance with regard to reference to the federal law. And so you can expect to see some amendments to that language on second reading. It's not going to change the basic thrust or purpose of this, but just making sure that that language is cleaned up. And with that, this is just introduced for consideration, and then second reading 2 weeks from now.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. O'Connor.
Mr. Spalding, we expect funding by what, May 10th?
Half of the funding, May 10th, and then the other half a year hence.
Yours will be May, what, 22?
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Spalding.
Thank you.
Council to consider ordinance 290421, an ordinance approving the issuance of bonds of the City of Noblesville Redevelopment District for financial assistance to the Nickel Plate Heritage Railroad.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Mr. Spalding.
All right. Again, Mr. President, members of the council, this ordinance before you is part of a, fairly interesting transaction that we have structured to support the Nickel Plate Express Railroad, which you're all familiar with. And at its core, we are assisting them with dealing with existing financing constraints. They have existing financing for some of their equipment. They are looking to restructure that financing. We, with the market power of the city, are able to access dollars at much more reasonable rate than they can as a small operator. Since this is an important asset to the city, we were interested in partnering with them to help them succeed. But we're entering this as a business transaction rather than kind of your traditional government spending thing. We're helping them with the financing. And another important point in this is that we have a partnership with the Hamilton County Tourism Commission on this deal as well, because this asset is very important to them too. And so basically the way this thing is structured is we'll do the financing, we'll fund it with city tax, but we have an agreement with the Nickel Plate Express where they will pay us back. So we'll effectively fund it with their revenue, and if their revenue is enough, we will not levy the tax, and we'll actually make the debt service payment with their revenue. And if their revenue falls short of what's needed to pay the debt service, that's where the relationship with Hamilton County Tourism comes into play. They have agreed to share 50% of any of that shortfall. So again, as I said, really structured like a business transaction as opposed to a, funding of a project with taxpayer money. Any other questions? I can talk more about the structure of the transaction.
No, please don't.
So this is not like some of the other ones where we have done it where we do not become a guarantor. We actually will be a guarantor on the line for this one. It's not like one of those where we're just giving our bond rating. This
Correct.
actually is a full transaction.
It's kind of like being a conduit issue where we're not a guarantor, but in this case, factually, we're not being a conduit issuer. We're actually being an issuer. We have some legal responsibility here, but the expectation with the deal is that the financial obligation will land on Nickel Plate Express.
And half of that shortfall is the responsibility of
Hamilton County Tourism, if it occurs, if there's a shortfall.
In your exhaustive research of Nickel Plate Express, you feel like their financials are in a situation that we...
Exhaustive research, yes. We do feel that. There has been actually a decent amount of conversation with them internally, and they have pretty strong reason to believe that this is an asset that can yield significantly more revenue than it has in the past, just based on other similar train-oriented tourism around the country. So.
Any other questions?
I only add that the debt service is structured such that they really got a year to, they had to recover from COVID and think about what they do. And so now that hopefully we'll start to really put that in the rearview mirror, they'll get back on track and start running some revenues through. So, I don't know. I think it's a good investment, but to Mr. Boyce's point, yeah, we're on the hook. But I think it's structured well, and there's been some real thought put into using the bond bank, and rates are still low for now, knock on wood. So,
Yeah, I think this is like 2 1/4 or something.
it's not expensive.
I think it's also worth noting that the city's making an investment in Hop Station too, which also obviously separate from this, but we are invested in the success of the Nickel Plate Express, so.
Yeah, and I think we discussed it the other day in finance, and we kind of came to a feeling that this is our history. This is a great part of Noblesville, and it's good for us to step up as a community and as a council to support their endeavors. So.
Somebody here from Nickel Plate Express?
What's that?
Is there somebody here?
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
Would you like to speak?
Hi, I'm Dagny Zupin. I'm the Executive Director of the Nickel Plate Express. So thank you all for your support up until this point. I would just like to say that to start off with, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. That was very easy, thank you.
I want you to come on this record. I asked Ms. Dicko where I assumed you're from the tourism bureau to come up to.
The other day, we did discuss potential ideas and plans for excursions, and your guys just kind of detail some of the confidence that you explained the other day about what's going to happen this next year.
Yeah, so as someone said earlier, we're really hoping that at this point, all the COVID restrictions are in the rearview mirror and we can operate as normal. During the first normal calendar year that we had in 2019, we took in about $350,000 in ticket sales, which for a first year, I think that's a pretty impressive feat. So we're hoping to continue to build on that success this year, offering dining excursions, partnering with local caterers and local beverage suppliers, offering family-friendly events. So really focusing on those sort of things. And once Hobbs Station is completed, they will be very much complementary assets that I think will really encourage people to drive to the city of Noblesville and experience everything that we have to offer here.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
We'll see you in 2
Thank
weeks.
you all.
Our meetings are all this long.
Yeah. Okay, any council comments?
Go ahead. I just had one. I just wanted to note the passing of a legend, Bobby Slick Leonard, passed away today. In my former life as a sportscaster, I came into contact with him a lot. And special man, special family, his wife Nancy, and meant so much to this community and to this state and to the game of basketball. Just thinking a lot of Slick today, and Hall of Famer, and what he meant, not just to the Indiana Pacers, but to IU and the entire state of Indiana when it comes to our love affair. I think our love affair with basketball, some of it can be directly connected to Slick Leonard. Boom Baby, that was his thing. And it's a sad day, but we're just all real happy to have the great memories of Slick Leonard.
Thank you.
I'd like to wish my mother a very happy birthday today. I don't know if she's
Mr. Jensen, did you have a
Yeah,
comment?
sorry, mine's not nearly as sentimental as any of those things. I just wanted to follow up on the comment, while I had it fresh in my mind about the county parking garage. I have confirmation from both the president of the county commissioners as well as the Noblesville County Commissioner, Steve Dillinger, that parking garage will be free and open to the public on night and weekends. So I have forwarded information to most of you to get that, but I wanted to just go on the record while we're on that topic this evening that is confirmed from the commissioners. Thank you. Thank you. that's an
Thank
important thing. So, no, thank you so much.
Any other comments?
Move to adjourn.
We will move this with a boom.